Well, college basketball is back, and here to discuss it, Fordham Interim Director of Athletics, Ed Cole. Ed, thanks for being here as always.
Pleasure, Manny. Always great to be with you.
Ed, so it was a national announcement. November 25th is the targeted opening date for college basketball this year. Where is Fordham and the Atlantic 10 fitting into that fold?
Yep, I think a big announcement by the Division I Council and the NCAA in terms of altering the start date for the men's and women's basketball seasons. They pushed it back approximately 2 weeks, Manny, to November 25th. I think a lot has been discussed about that opportunity. What it actually does is it's a Wednesday before Thanksgiving, which allows for all competitions to begin when basically all campuses will be empty at that point in time, including Fordham University, where students will be sent home and have concluded their fall semester before the Thanksgiving break, which was a real big safety precaution and protocol that many institutions throughout the country have taken to allow students to go home for Thanksgiving break and not to return to their campuses for obvious reasons of possible contamination and bringing back the virus to school. So all professors and classes have been determined to either have their finals prior to Thanksgiving or to issue them virtually after the fact or in terms of papers or projects. So a good initiative by the NCAA, I think a safe one to start the NCAA basketball season on empty campuses. And obviously there'd be no fans or spectators at this point in time anyway. So we're excited. It gives a little bit more direction and clarity to our student athletes and to our basketball coaches. And then it also basically pushed up a little bit of some of the start time in terms of hours for the practice, which actually is today, September 21st. Each of the programs will have to do their 8 hours. So they're up and running in terms of men's and women's hoops. And I think we all are excited about that opportunity and excited to have some competitions on our campus.
So before we hopped on, you mentioned the fact that practices are back. They are going on throughout the campus, and you have multiple athletic programs practicing at once. What have you learned from that process that prepares the school and the teams for the potential of seasons returning?
Yeah, it's a slow restart. It's a slow kind of reintroduction for a lot of our student athletes. And though a lot of them have been probably working out and training on their own or doing some individual workouts, it's an opportunity to kind of get some of our teams and our programs back, whether that be circuit training. They're currently going to be in separate pods, no contact, obviously proper social distancing and COVID protocol. And special thanks to our training staff, Erin Cameron and Tom O'Brien, for establishing plans for all of our programs to efficiently and effectively do that and make sure that we are doing it in a proper means and a safe means. We're continuing to do our surveillance testing, which also is beginning this week, which allows all of our student athletes, staff, team managers, athletic department administrators, all continue their testing protocols with COVID, daily temperature checks, proper medical physicals and clearances on a daily basis. And we're very, very efficient, very much staying on top of it, but excited that our student athletes are able to be active, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally. In terms of our seasons, the A-10 and the Patriot League, still moving forward with the desire to have fall sports compete in the spring seasons. And even our spring sports, whether that be softball, baseball, of course, golf, tennis, rowing, etc. The A-10 has done a good job in terms of establishing regional pods to minimize and remove any air travel and minimize any hotel stays. So proper protocols in the state. And then, of course, as you started this conversation, our winter sports are still in play, and we're excited to have some seasons here come the end of October, November. So we're moving forwards day by day, but I think we're excited at least to get some sort of normalcy back on our campus.
How restricted will the athletes be? Let's say a season returns and everyone goes home, the athletes stay on campus. Would there be that expectation that they stay on campus for the duration of a potential season?
I'd say right now, Manny, that is the safest way I see it. And I think that's the proper process and protocol to maintain their safety and maintain control in terms of the external outside of our own little bubble that we have here in the Rose Hill campus and at Rose Hill. That could possibly change depending on how things go. But from right now, that looks like that would be the best direction and plan to minimize any exposure and any limit, and also limit any obviously contagiousness to the virus from that standpoint.
One of the developments from the news, the ACC has already agreed to have all their teams participate in the NCAA tournament. There's encouragement for other conferences to follow suit to, quote, celebrate college basketball, given that we missed out on the 2020 NCAA tournament. It would be very nice to have a broader scale this year. What are your thoughts on that recent news?
Yeah, very interesting, obviously, comments out of the ACC, and obviously it's a very terrific and talented conference, and especially from a basketball standpoint, I think a lot of those teams and programs probably feel that they are talented enough to automatically go into the tournament, and I understand that. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that does play out, though, Manny, in terms of the process and the selection committees. And even some of that dialogue is beginning aggressively around different non-conference scheduling. So that, the pushback of the 2 weeks does remove a few of the non-conference and exhibition game schedules for men's, women's basketball. You're probably hearing a lot about bubble conversations and different tournaments and MTEs around the country that are being hosted to try to create these safe sites to host multiple games for men's and women's basketball programs. So we are working towards that and looking at that non-conference schedule. There's multiple options of 23 games and 2 MTEs, 24 games and 1 MTE, 25 games in total in terms of how many games. Is a few different options to work with I believe approximately 27 total games. And that's something that we're all trying to identify what the best strategy is for non-conference games and how to do that in a very safe and safe protocol. And whether that be in and out bus trips, whether that be obviously maintaining a local schedule. As you could understand, there's a lot of complex pieces to that, as well as possibly looking at some of these other bubble creations to try to have a safe environment. And then you're already seeing many conferences, Manny, I think whether it be the MAC or the Big East, who are kind of pushing up the start of their conference season or increasing their conference games. So I think it's a combination of possibly increasing conference games for some conferences to allow additional games to offset some of the confusion and challenges of non-conference, and or start a little bit earlier, Manny, to allow extra weeks and a little bit of a buffer area in case there would need to be any makeup games due to positive tests or quarantine or travel issues or travel restrictions. I think it's wise right now. I think a lot of conferences are looking at the ability to have built-in extra days for makeup conference games throughout the next, probably those 3 months of December, January, February, even into March before conference tournament play. If needed, that would obviously have a significant impact to the standings. So it's hard to fully forecast and hard to fully schedule and plan for, but I think we're seeing some good progress, and I think you're seeing a lot of folks try to be as creative and innovative, yet conservative and efficient in terms of the safety protocol means, and not putting their student athletes or programs at too much risk. And then in terms of the net, which obviously is the quality of schedule for any of these individual institutions, it's going to be interesting to see how they evaluate the net this year, knowing a lot of non-conference schedules are going to be changing. You heard a lot of preseason tournaments has already been canceled or rescheduled to different locations, and obviously probably be lesser games in total. It's to be determined in terms of how the net evaluation, which will dictate the at-large bids for a lot of schools throughout the country in terms of March Madness, and we'll also see where March Madness is going to take place and how that's going to be structured.
You referenced the schedule, which is an important point. There's obviously some agency now, given that so much has been moved around already. So at what point do you think a schedule could start to take shape for the men's and women's programs?
Yeah, I think the first step was last week, really, in terms of that November 25th date, as well as the ruling in terms of total possible competitions. I think each conference is obviously coming out with a little bit of their own updated, revised, whether it be scheduling or looking to block off some dates. So I think those two steps were first in the process. And then I think, we're having multiple meetings. We actually have one this afternoon as well. I believe I have one tomorrow. Today's for the men, tomorrow for the women, in terms of the continued conversation and evaluation of their schedule. And, it's almost in a weird way, Manny, where you're kind of looking at multiple models, right? Depending on how things can turn out and evolve. And as we already approach October, kind of what that looks like and how that things change. And not only just the conference and the NCAA, we're also battling, as you know, Manny, know it very well as being a student here, the New York State guidelines and New York City guidelines. So in terms of travel restrictions, that's going to dictate a lot of decision-making process here. So we're trying to be open-minded. We want to be positive, but we also need to be realistic in terms of the safety and the concern of the health of our student athletes. So right now, those state restrictions in terms of certain states that would demand a 14-day quarantine make it very, very challenging for us to obviously leave the city. So how do we be creative? How do we look at some folks? But I think that's going to be okay. It seems like a lot of every conference is dealing with the same thing. A lot of the tri-state area schools are all dealing with the same challenges. So I know a lot of folks are looking for games right now. I think there's opportunities to put together a very nice and competitive non-conference schedule, as well as hopefully maintain and keep as many of the current scheduled games that we have. So I'd say over the next probably 2 to 3 weeks, you'll see some more clarity as we get into the middle of October on the non-conference schedule.
Ed, look forward to seeing some hoops back at Rose Hill. Appreciate you taking the time.
Manny, we're all looking forward to it and looking forward to the Rose Hill gym having some basketball in it. I know we all need it. We all want it. The entire city is looking forward to that, and excited that we're talking about some positive momentum this semester. A lot of patience, a lot of understanding, but also a tremendous amount of hard work by our institution, our president, our leadership. And so far, all of our protocols and testing and process has gone very, very well and very strongly. And I think it's just kudos to Fordham for putting us in the position here at this point at the end of September to be able to talk about some competition. So excited to move forward.